Security is complex, but it doesn't have to be difficult. Microsoft Copilot for Security brings the paradigm-shifting power of generative AI to the security industry at large. Copilot doesn't replace human insight and imagination. It complements your ingenuity at machine speed and scale, letting you see more and move faster. It performs complex security and admin tasks intuitively, elevating the expertise of the entire team. Junior members get a coach to develop their skills, while experts have an always-ready AI assistant, freeing them up to innovate, create, and think strategically. With Microsoft Copilot for Security on your team, you'll transform the way you protect and support your organization. Security is complex. Make it simple with Copilot.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Microsoft Copilot for Security Tech Accelerator session, where we will deep dive into the latest Copilot features announced at Microsoft Secure last month. We had an exciting announcement at Secure that Copilot is entering general availability. Now that we're here, we want to show you what you can get started with today to customize Copilot for Security for your cybersecurity workflows. I'm Kathleen Lavely, and I'm a Product Marketing Manager for Copilot.
And I'm Ryan Munch, Principal Technical Specialist for Copilot.
In this session, we'll look at what we've learned from Copilot's last 12 months in preview and early access. We'll recap some of the news and latest innovations for Copilot for Security, and we'll walk through helpful demos for those getting started with Copilot, including how to create custom prompt books, how to add and use your organization's knowledge bases, and how to create a custom plugin for your security tools in Copilot. With that, let's get started. When we announced Copilot for Security last year, we set out with one vision: to help security and IT teams protect their organizations with the speed and scale that generative AI provides. Copilot is the first generative AI assistant that leverages your Microsoft and third-party security tools to move faster and strengthen team expertise. These last 12 months, we've seen AI technology advance incredibly quickly, with LLMs like ChatGPT taking the world by storm. But Copilot for Security changes the game for cybersecurity because it brings together global threat intelligence, industry best practices, and organizational security data into tailored insights. So let's talk about all of the news with GA. At Secure, an exciting thing we shared was just how much time savings Copilot creates for security analysts. In research from Microsoft's Office of the Chief Economist, security analysts were 22% faster on common security tasks with Copilot. They also achieved these time savings while increasing accuracy by 7%. Plus, 97% of these analysts said they want to use Copilot next time, so teams can improve their work while improving job satisfaction, as analysts can prioritize more critical tasks instead of being bogged down in mundane parts of their role. In our industry, where 1 in 3 cybersecurity roles goes unfulfilled, empowering security analysts with greater speed and accuracy means stronger defenses against attackers. But to keep it rolling, we've shared even more news at Secure, including insights from our early access customers. They shared their favorite Copilot use cases and where they are seeing massive time savings. We also introduced new innovations for Copilot that we'll spend time digging into today. In addition to introducing custom prompt books and knowledge base integrations, which we're about to get into, we also shared that Copilot would be available in an expanded list of languages and that it would be available as a flexible pay-as-you-go pricing model to help teams get started and experiment as they ramp up.
That flexibility is so helpful. As customers are aligning their workflows, they can scale Copilot up or down.
Absolutely. Copilot needs to work with the workflows analysts and IT teams are already running. This is where it drives impact. So that's why we'd like to deep dive today on customizing Copilot for your business operations. And we'll start with customizing prompt books. But before we jump into that, Ryan, can you give us a 60-second rundown on what a prompt book is in Copilot and how they help?
Of course. Prompt books are a helpful tool in Copilot for standardizing security workflows. You can run a series of prompts in succession based on existing flows with just a few clicks. Each prompt book requires a specific input, for example, a code snippet or a threat actor name, with each prompt building off of the prior response until an outcome is achieved. Copilot for Security comes with pre-built prompt books, such as what you see here with the threat actor profile prompt book selected from the home screen. They're also available in the prompt book library. I have prompt books I've created, those shared in my organization, and those provided by Microsoft. As you mentioned, Kathleen, you're now able to build your own step-by-step prompt books to align your work in Copilot with existing processes. Today, we'll do just that by customizing the default Defender incident prompt book to align with my organization's incident response process. When it comes to custom prompt books, it's important to keep the goals of the workflow in mind. For this prompt book, I want to ensure it encapsulates critical processes while providing flexibility for various teams to achieve different outcomes. Prompt books can cater to specific sources, skills, or outputs based on the incorporation of inputs throughout the workflow. To begin customization, I'll start with modifying the identifying details of the prompt book with the name, tags, and description. These are used to help my colleagues locate and run the right prompt book for the workflow at hand. In the first prompt, the input supplied is the Defender Incident ID, which is what kicks off the workflow in the prompt book. Each prompt and response are sequential, building context until leading to my outcome. My organization is a complex one with numerous business units and subsidiaries operating throughout the world, many having unique needs. The myriad of different solutions for device management will cause me to edit the fifth prompt to allow specification of an MDM solution. Similarly, in the next prompt, I'll provide the same input to maintain workflow alignment. With that said, I'll focus on the prompt that will define the outcome. When writing a report in Copilot, prompt details determine the final form of the report. I know that most incidents will probably go to the SOC directors, stakeholders of technology groups, or executives. So the first modification will make the report an input so that a type can be supplied. Next, I know the reports will have audiences that vary based on the incident. So I'll turn the audience type into an input as well. My final consideration is the outcome. Should it provide next steps, key takeaways, risk assessment? Do I need to provide language localization? I can leave both of those determinations to the operator. So I'll add inputs for different outcomes and report language. I'll now save this to my tenant so that everyone can use it and give it a quick test. Heading back to the library, I'll run my new prompt book. After clicking a new session, a dialog will appear with the input values required for running my prompt book. In this iteration, I'll specify Intune as my device management tool, cater to a technical security audience, and provide them with key recommendations written in Japanese. This will hopefully inform their decision-making process to align their teams with potential remediations. After clicking run, my prompt book will start a new session with the custom inputs, providing a tailored outcome. In just a few minutes, I provided an investigation as a senior analyst would, created a reusable workflow in the form of a prompt book, and built it with the flexibility to be used across my organization. Prompt books are a simple but helpful way to standardize your processes in Copilot. But the next capability Kathleen's going to walk through will further help you port playbooks and standardize operating procedures into Copilot.
Yes, awesome. Knowledge base integrations are another new feature with GA. Knowledge bases, or KBs, could include your company policies, incident response procedures, standard playbooks for handling phishing alerts, or report templates for communication across departments. This one is exciting because it means Copilot can now leverage these resources within session context, giving you personalized support like never before. For knowledge bases, there are two ways to bring in your organization's knowledge into Copilot, through a file upload and through Azure AI Search. And today, we're going to look at a scenario to leverage Azure AI Search. It's another day in Woodgrove, and unsurprisingly, we have another security incident. Ryan slipped up and clicked on an email in support of a questionable business venture, so now it's time to investigate. Our response process starts by pasting in the email headers in question for analysis. In under a minute, I've got back a breakdown on the email. Using the response, I quickly learn about the origin and nature of the email. I can use that to uncover more about the email sender and their domain. Microsoft Defender Threat Intelligence can help me with exactly that. The passive DNS telemetry gives me a key piece of context, that the domain resolving to the email origin was only associated for a brief time. This is already suspicious. Next, I'll see what Copilot can provide for the IP and the domain. Sure enough, it's tied to a threat actor, Ruby Sleet. I could confirm the source data in MDTI, but I already have enough to understand the phishing threat they present. So I'll turn my attention to the takedown process by determining the registrant behind the registration for the suspicious domain. I can uncover that by asking about the registrar behind the domain. Next, I'll ask for a contact for the registrant so I know where to send my takedown notice. Typically, to incorporate my company's takedown template, I need to find the proper template and insert values from my investigation before sending. At Woodgrove, we use Azure AI Search to index and query our corporate content, like our policies and incident response templates. While not difficult, this certainly is time-consuming to do on my own. To expedite, I'll ask Copilot to search within Azure AI Search to locate my template. This will look across my organization's Azure AI Search index for the information relevant to my prompt. Once located, the matching document helps compose my email, while Copilot inserts the key values needed for the takedown process. In just a few seconds, Copilot has provided a finished email, which I can now export to send. As I mentioned, KBs can cover your company policies, standard playbooks, or in this case, a communication template used for takedown requests. By incorporating these resources, Copilot gains insight into your organization's unique operations, which gives you personalized assistance aligned with your unique processes and procedures. But if you're thinking now, wait, Kathleen, I don't use Azure AI Search. Fear not. KBs can also be uploaded as files in their existing formatting. This is helpful in instances where you might want to ask Copilot if the device in an incident is compliant with your corporate policy. Copilot can directly reference these documents, which grounds the results against your organization's standards. What's great about this capability is its seamless integration. You won't need to modify the document. It effortlessly handles unstructured text and requires no preparation or data normalization. But let's not stop the dialogue on Copilot sources with knowledge bases. Sources, which are how we label integrations in Copilot, are so important to getting the most from Copilot. But if the integration to your tool doesn't already exist, what can you do?
Well, you could create your own.
Right. Let's talk about custom plugins to get more of the security stack working with Copilot.
Like you said, Kathleen, Copilot's ability to reason over your sources is core to your success. However, with the fragmented state of many organizations' security stacks, this likely means connections to multiple, dare I say dozens, of tools. Plugins, another type of source, are the way we bring together insights and data from across systems and ground Copilot responses with real-time accuracy. And while we're building an extensible ecosystems of partners and plugins, customers are likely to need one that hasn't been built and may want to create their own. Copilot's plugin architecture allows different types of plugins, and we'll address three: API, GPT, and KQL plugins. Each type has inherent advantages, and what's best suited for you depends on the workflow you intend Copilot to support. To refocus on the three types of plugins, most security workflows today are connected through an API, and this is likely the plugin type you'll use to connect your systems. API plugins in Copilot support custom endpoint URLs, multiple authentication types, and parameter passing to endpoints. API plugins are best suited for external or non-Microsoft systems. The next one, Custo Query Language, is great for querying and analyzing data at scale. If you've worked much at all with Microsoft products, there's a good chance your organization has a library of useful queries you have developed over time. Those queries also make excellent skills, which is precisely what KQL plugins can help facilitate. Finally, GPT plugins are a bit unique, and for many, a brand new concept. They don't connect to external systems, but instead provide an understanding to the underlying LLMs. Skills composed under GPT plugins are great at processing documents, unstructured data sets, and data analysis to provide new definitions for Copilot to use. Consider this scenario. As any good security practitioner, you like to protect any reader from accidentally clicking on any type of malicious indicators. You can do this manually today through a process known as defanging, which takes IPs and URLs and renders them inert. Through a GPT plugin, you can introduce the definition of how your organization likes to defang URLs to Copilot. This way, anytime you ask Copilot to defang a URL, it knows precisely the way to format the indicator for you. Now that we've set the stage on the plugin options for Copilot, let's look at a custom API plugin I'd like to build for Copilot. My organization works with multiple threat intelligence sources, so I need to add capability for Alien Vault to support our normal due diligence workflows. We interact with Alien Vault through its APIs, which I'll connect with the custom plugin. API plugins come in two parts. One is the plugin schema, which can either work with OpenAI's plugin manifest or Copilot specification. We'll use Copilot since it has a bit more capability. The schema will define the way to connect to the API, whether it requires authentication, and if so, the authentication type. It also provides a link to the settings file, which defines API interactions. In the settings file, I provide a definition for the title and description, and define individual skills in the same way. This helps Copilot with selection for prompt response. Skills can be aligned against different parts of the API, providing flexibility to send specific values and assemble the results uniquely back to the users. Let's now work with our custom plugin. I've already uploaded it, so I'm going to quickly enable it to make it available for Copilot's use in my session. With the plugin ready, I'll confirm the skills I created are now available as suggested prompts, which I'll check in my prompt bar. I'll start with the prompt, what does Alien Vault know about this IP address? The results give me a good readout at the available threat intelligence. I'll use another skill to expand against malware associated with the IP, and to round out the example, I'll take one last step by using a third skill to return information against the first malware hash. If I wanted to, I could now augment any of this information with other sources in Copilot to complete my workflow.
So cool, Ryan. Can we build a custom prompt book for Alien Vault too?
Yes, good call out. Prompt books can be customized for any plugins, including this new custom Alien Vault one. But let's save that for next time.
That sounds good. We have covered so much in this session today, from recapping the time savings analysts are seeing with Copilot to showcasing the new prompt book and knowledge-based customizations available at GA, and even our deeper look into plugin customizations. There's a lot of exciting opportunity here for customers to make Copilot work in lockstep with their existing operations and strengthen team expertise to focus on what matters. I hope everyone joining us today learned a few things and are as excited about the innovations we're seeing in generative AI for cybersecurity as I am. We truly believe that this technology will be revolutionary in cybersecurity, and we continue to invest and innovate to deliver even more value in the future. If you missed it, watch the Secure announcement for all the latest on Copilot's general availability and contact sales to get started using Copilot. Please stay tuned for our open AMA. Thanks for joining.
Catch you next time, pilots. All right, thank you for watching and appreciate you staying on for the Ask Me Anything. I am here with two of our resident experts in Copilot for Security. They work from our customer experience engineering team. Please welcome Yaniv Sasha and Gad Epstein. They'll be helping to answer your questions today as they come in from LinkedIn and from the tech community. So our first question actually comes from Matthew. He asked, I've set up Copilot for Security using the Microsoft Copilot for Security portal, but I can't find any Microsoft Copilot for Security compute resources in any of my Azure subscriptions. How do I find it?
Okay, let me, so first of all, Ryan, happy to be here. Hello, God, my good friend. So if I understand the question, we are talking about Azure resources that we want to bring some security insight on top of them, and we want to know which Copilot should be answered this use case.
Yes, they're trying to find their Microsoft Copilot for Security compute resources.
Okay. So as a ground rule, Copilot for Security, the product that we are dealing today, should answer security use cases for Azure, M365, and the global corpus of Microsoft and third-party solution. I know that we have also Azure Copilot that also answers some of the use cases that is more operational side of things, but the Copilot for Security should answer with more plugin and more use cases also on your Azure compute resources.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Yaniv. Our next question I know is near and dear to both of your hearts, so you're going to like it. Here's our question from the tech community. Do I need KQL query plugins if I don't have any queries already stored in my environment?
Yeah, so that's a great question. And first of all, I'm going to say there's two ways to work with KQL queries. One of them is just to use the existing plugins that allow you to do natural language to KQL. And this is basically where you're going to type in text, in English or any other language, what you're trying to do. And the plugin is going to convert that into a query, run the query, and give you the answer. So that's one way, starting in text. Now, if you want to run queries directly, you have a couple of options. One, you can create a plugin with the type of KQL, and within this plugin, you can embed the queries that you want to run. You will provide description of the plugin, and that's going to be used by the product to launch the query. Okay, so that's another option that you have. I would say a third opportunity is to actually go to advanced hunting in the Defender portal, where you can still use text to ask for queries, but you also have the editor for the query, where you can easily change the tables, the timeline, and any other parameters. So that's another option that you have.
And Gad, let me ask you a follow-up question. So you mentioned natural language to KQL, and you mentioned custom plugin with KQL query. And Ryan, you showed that in the webinar. When to choose what? Like, can you help me decide when I need to go to the NL to KQL or when I need to go to the?
Yeah, absolutely. So first of all, for folks that are unskilled with KQL, that are not level 500 or 400, many times it's easy to go and just craft your question in text and see what you get from the product. It's not going to be 100% correct, but it will be a start. And then you can say, oh, actually, I meant another table, or I meant a different time frame, so on and so forth. This is a very important capability because it allows you to query data from large sets of data, right? Security Copilot and large language model based products are not there to ingest tremendous amount of data and process. They rely on queries to distill the information that you want to process in context to other source systems that you're bringing in. So it's very, very important to use that. I would use the custom plugins for KQL for what I would call preset queries. So in many organizations, you already know what queries you're going to run for your phishing investigations, for example. It's either provided to tier 1 and tier 2 as part of the process that they need to go to triage, or these are connected to dashboards, for example, where basically you plug in an incident or an alert and get results in relation to that. So if you have those, I would embed those as custom plugins so you can call on them easily, right, within the product and get the data in. And finally, I would say, if you're a threat hunter or if you're very focused on creating accurate queries that in the long run can be detections and so on, I would go to the Defender portal because there you have the most granularity in having the editor where you can manipulate those queries. So that's at least what I would do.
And the beauty on the query editor, the embedded natural language to KQL, is that you can create kind of conversation with the plugin itself, so it can tune you. And you touch also different personas like the threat hunter or the junior analyst. So I think that a good point is also aligning the skill or the plugin to actual persona, and NL to KQL, like typing your question in a natural language and see which table answer it with query, is also a learning experience. Yeah, you can be better on the next query that you created. So I really like this aspect also on Copilot, because we are also aiming to empower your analyst and make it like better.
Awesome answer. So I think in review, what I heard is that if you need to go and figure out and get some familiarity with how to write KQL, go and try it out in either one of the embedded experiences in Defender or in the standalone portal. After you gain some familiarity, put it into a custom plugin, and then you can start to use that more commonly in some of your workflows and help spread it out to the rest of your team. Great response, just what we expected from the resident experts. We have some more questions on the way. You ready for the next one? All right, this one comes from Wolfgang on LinkedIn. He asked, can I use promptbooks to read and interpret security logs?
Yes, for sure. Gad, do you want to take it or I will?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, promptbooks is just a aggregation of steps that you want to take when you're doing your work, right? Usually you get to promptbooks because you keep asking the same questions, right? Or the same prompts, and then you say, hey, wait a second, why don't I take these 3 questions or 3 prompts and I package them so next time I have an incident, it will run on these 3, and then what I would get is much more processed response, right? It already took a couple of steps from me. It's a kind of a power play. So that's first of all why you would use the prompt books. And yes, to get to logs, you can use a construct we just spoke about, which is KQL, right? So you can look at the various logs and try to extract various events, whether it's in proximity to the timing of the event that you're dealing with or by other criteria. And that query will bring in additional context from the logs that you can then, consider in saying if something is true positive or false positive. So I would say separate the 2 constructs, right? Prompt books is a kind of a way to aggregate a playbook, basically, right? To put some steps together. Within it, you can absolutely use KQL queries, whether you write it in just English, right, and it's natural language to KQL, or you use more advanced constructs like custom plugins with a hardwired queries to do that. But you can absolutely do that. Again, the overall goal for you is to bring all these pieces of context into this single bucket. So eventually you can ask the product to write a report, to ask it what's the confidence in that being malicious, assuming all the pieces of context that you bring in.
Yes, because the more context it has, the better it is. Excellent point. I love that response. So that's a great way for you all to get started with prompt books and working with your logs in that way. Our next question comes from the tech community. This one's from Leaf. He asks, what's the hallucination rate of the AI? So maybe this is a great opportunity, Gad or Yaniv, to talk about how our architecture for Copilot works with and helps to anchor in our sources of truth.
Okay, and I can take it. So Copilot for Security is generative AI, a large language model product that the engine underneath is GPT. And we have a couple of technique, or as you mentioned, Ryan, the architecture of the product built that it's a security product, and we are relying on a method how we ground the data that we are querying. So let me give you an example. When I ask him Copilot for Security, summarize me a Defender incident or summarize me a Sentinel incident, the foundational model itself, the GPT itself, that was trained on the global corpus of the internet, on Wikipedia data, on stock exchange data, doesn't know about Sentinel or my Sentinel incident. So we are using a technology that called a RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation. This is like our plugin ecosystem, that when you are asking questions that, for example, related to Sentinel, your TI data, we are not going to the foundational model directly. We first going to the remote system. It can be API call, it can be a KQL call, asking the question on the context of the user, bring in like a JSON file or other data set, and then reason over and injected into the foundational model that help us to do a parameter filling, that help us to build like the response, to summarize the data, to reason over the data. But the true data set that we are working or reason over is not coming from the foundational model that can be a suspect for fabrication, but we are actually going to the true source of the data and fetching the data. RAG, Retrieval Augmented Generation, help us with other two important aspects. First of all, freshness of the data, because we know that a pre-trained model like GPT, they are state in time, like they train on the internet in 2021 or 2022, and when you are asking them, for example, for a new CVE that published in 2024, the foundational model doesn't know. So we need to go remotely, fetching the data on the CVE, and only then inject the data. So this is the first thing. Another thing, and you also touch it on the video, is like the internal knowledge base. So if I'm a part of Woodgrove organization and I have also my own way how to deal with phishing, my own template how to take down a domain, the foundational model doesn't know nothing about it. So we need a way to fetch internal, the secret sauce of my organization, and only then use the magic of the GPT, the statistical model of LLM, to know how to craft the answer, how to reason the important data from the answer. So RAG is playing a big role. We have other aspects like our responsible AI that help us to help with the fabrication.
So I love that response. So I think if I heard you correctly, if we don't source the data from a plugin, or if we don't source the data from a knowledge base, or if we can't retrieve it from the baked-in threat intelligence, then we would not produce a response back to the user in a prompt. All right. That's a great way to convey the architecture. I love the depth of that response. Maybe we'll have, I'm thinking, let's add one more component to that. Gad, would you like to talk about the free threat intelligence that's included as part of the data with Microsoft Copilot for Security?
Absolutely. So when you get the Security Copilot, you also get access to Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence through Security Copilot. So a source appears in Security Copilot that you can leverage, including the threat intelligence information that you have. And that is very useful, again, in the sense of collecting context. So if you have a specific incident that you're pulling into Security Copilot, and you want to find out what's the reputation of the IP addresses, what threat actors potentially can be involved. This can all be easily pulled in. So threat intelligence kind of find its way to be mainstream in a way, right? Part of your process of investigation, and not necessarily something that sometimes is separate with separate folks doing threat intelligence work. So that is a big addition that comes with Security Copilot.
And
Go ahead, Yaniv.
And Gad, do you get only the option for MDTI in the context of Copilot, or you are getting also option in the portal itself?
That's a good question. I will let you answer it.
Yes, so MDTI has a couple of flavors. It has like the option with the skill itself, like the plugin for Microsoft Threat Intelligence, the ability to ask questions and get the context, as you mentioned. But it also has a flavor. It's an actual product in the Microsoft portfolio, and it has the option of doing a workbench when you investigate an IP or a certificate or other data about an entity. You have a full-fledged portal with a huge amount of content, good content about our threat actor, about tooling, about vulnerability, and every Copilot customers have a full access to also MDTI portal to do investigation, to read about the new vulnerability that is coming. So it's a great value proposition.
That's awesome. So it's another piece of context that's naturally baked into the prompt response process. And it's an incredible value for all customers out there. All right, so our next question comes from Steve on LinkedIn. He asks, how does Microsoft envision the evolution of Copilot for security over the next few years? And what are the key areas of focus for expanding its capabilities? Gad, did you want to take this one?
Yeah. Sure. So that's a great question. And again, there's a lot going on. So maybe I can attest to where we are right now and the immediate things that are going to follow. So first, I want to make sure that everybody understands that the name is Security Copilot, but it's also a platform for many, many other services in the enterprise that are focused on compliance and identity and management and privacy and so on. So if you look at the list of connectors within the product, you will get a sense to that. It's not just a security type thing like Microsoft Defender for Threat Intelligence or external attack surfaces management and things like that, but it's also Purview and Intune and Firewall and other pieces in the enterprise. So the future is also in marrying some of these components together. And again, it's just the collection of context from various systems. Like if you want to have enhanced device context, Intune is likely the better place to go and find compliance with policies, what can be done to fix in compliance scenarios and things like that. Or think of Purview. Purview gives you a good sense of user risk and data risk. So imagine you have an incident that comes in and you need to have a quick evaluation of the potential blast radius of this incident. If you see that there is a high risk associated with the user in this incident, you may say, hey, maybe I'll move it directly to tier 4, or maybe I will allocate resources to work on it immediately because it's a high blast radius type of incident. So think of all these scenarios and then think of other personas in your enterprise using it, like the Intune administrator and the inside risk folks and many others in your enterprise. So this is more of a platform for many of the things that you need to achieve in your enterprise. The other component I would say is the two things that Ryan and Kathleen showed previously. And that is the focus on process, which comes down to custom prompt books and automations and custom plugins and things like that. And then the knowledge bases piece of it, which more alludes to what's special about your organization. Like if you do patching on Wednesday, likely on Thursday, you're going to get all kinds of false positives because of that, right? So it's an important information to have. So trying to bring in all these organizational knowledge and trying to bring process, which is your own process, how you do things based on your industry and based on your legacy environment and based on your experiences, is very, very important. So this will continue to be focal areas going forward. What's going to be out there in a couple of years? Very hard to say. This is moving very, very fast.
So I love that response. Oh, go ahead, Yaniv. Would you like to add something there?
I want to ask a follow-up question to Gad. He liked my follow-up questions, I know. Gad, you mentioned the Microsoft product, the Entra, the Intune, the Defender. I know that we have two flavors of the product, the embedded and the standalone. Can you maybe shed light when to use what is the difference between them? I think it's important concept to highlight.
Awesome. Yeah, that's a really good question. So I would say the way I like to differentiate between the two is one of them is a high context environment, and the other one starts with a zero context. And let me explain. When you use the standalone experience, you start with a canvas that is empty. There's nothing in there, and it's up to your creativity to pull things in, to bring context in. You need to say, hey, summarize this incident from Defender, and it will bring the incident into the canvas. Check the IP addresses for reputation. Check the devices in this incident. And all of that will accumulate into something that you can then use for a report, for a verdict, for anything else. So this really depends on your creativity, and you're the one building the context, providing the information that will be used to retrieve these things. For some, it's not easy, right? You need to know how to prompt. You need to be skilled in that. You need to be creative at some times, which again has good use for threat hunting and things of that sort. The other way to do it is what I call high context environment, where you don't need to prompt. It's promptless, right? Basically, you go in an incident in Defender, for example, and it shows you an incident summary. You didn't need to create to prompt engineer and all of that. It just appears on the side. Now, why is it a high context environment? Because by just going to this page that has this incident, you allude to many things, that this is the incident you're interested in. It also uses all the alerts within the incident to create a summary. So that's where you get value without needing to intentionally prompt. So I would say these are kind of different use cases. One comes just to augment your experience with the security tools, which is very important. And another one is a more creative experience, where you create your own context and make decisions on what you want to bring in or not. So these are kind of my perceptions of the two flavors.
Now, is it possible to combine the two flavors if necessary?
Yeah, you can definitely make the move from one to another. You know, a very simple example, if I'm looking at an incident summary in the embedded experience, again, I'm in an incident, it shows me a summary on the side. Let's say I like the summary, there's IP addresses in it that I want to check. I want to use it as a basis for my investigation. I can just, there's 3 dots you can click and say, open in Security Copilot. And then it will just take that information, open it in the standalone experience, from which you can continue and pivot. So that's another one way to do it. You can do the other trip, right? If you're asking it to craft a KQL query from a natural language, and you have the query, but now you're saying, you know something, now I'm actually want to use the capabilities within the Defender portal, because there's an editor there and I can play with the query using the editor and not text. You can do the other way around. You're going to have this little button that says Go Hunt, and you can click on it from the standalone experience, and it will take you to the embedded experience, to advanced hunting, where you will have your query there and you can start editing it in the editor. So these trips are very, very useful in the sense that you're kind of moving to the environment which provide you the best productivity for what you're trying to do.
So building off of your analogy, it sounds like in one case, you take the context you have and then build additional context from the sea of available sources inside of the standalone. Whereas the other one is more aligned against the capacity of arriving at context and then focusing on the next piece of context.
Right.
Awesome. All right. That's good clarity for me, at least. One other follow-up I have to the point you brought up earlier, you talked about, I think, what is democratizing security, or having a security context into any type of workflow or any type of experience in front of you. So I'm going to flip the script on both of you because you both have extensive security backgrounds. As a security operator, what discipline or what type of different role do you think you'll start to more immediately interact with as we bring in skills for Intune and Purview and other specialities that exist inside of an enterprise?
So I think it may be even a mix of personas, because God also mentioned about like connecting the dots between like Entra, Intune, identity, device management. So and me and God and you, we are doing a lot of executive briefing, and you discuss about democratize security. So we are seeing a lot of executives that used to it was hard to them to ask a hard security question to check like the posture or the trends around incidents. And now with Copilot and some of the plan that we will have also in the roadmap aspect, we'll be able to ask a hard technical question in a natural language and get like some polls from their organization about narrative. So I see a lot of acceptance also on the executive side that can interact with like a hard advanced hunting queries in a natural language and get answer back. This is like my take on your question.
Awesome. I love that, Yaniv. So you're going to head into the device management world and start to better understand what you're protecting and what you need to protect. Gad, what about for you? Where do you think you'll venture into in kind of different areas of context or different ways to operate outside of security?
Yeah, I think the very interesting scenarios come from Entra Identity, because at least in context to SOC, it's germane to an investigation, right? Some of your first steps are going to be there. I think Purview is super interesting too, just in terms of understanding blast radius. Intune in the context of devices is very interesting. And this is all from the perspective of security, because that's our comfort place, right? But I do think from the perspective of device management, for example, just the ability to compare policies on devices and understand why is behaving one way and another is behaving in a different way is a huge time saving and productivity saver. So there's a lot of goodness all around.
Thank you both for those perspectives. Turns out that people really like your advice and what you've been outlining so far, so they have a lot more questions. We have another one that's coming in. This one is from the tech community. They ask, the cost model is based on the security compute unit. Is it possible to shed some light on how one SCU maps to a real world use case? For example, X number of questions asked in chat for security operations. Dad, did you want to take that one?
Yeah, that's a good question. And, I think we all need to get used to this new model. I think it's a great model because it really lines up the interest of all parties to this, because it kind of measures the actual resources that are put into answering a prompt, right? So a security capacity unit is basically partial compute. So when you actually select your partial compute, you're selecting throughput. That's what you're selecting. And again, it's a per hour that you're selecting it. So if I'm to use an analogy, it's how wide the pipe is, right? So you're selecting the width of a pipe. Let's think of a water pipe, how much water goes through it. You can select a very narrow pipe, and then you can't get a lot through it, and you're going to exceed how much you need to go through it. Or you can select a very wide pipe and have a lot more capacity, throughput to bring your questions in and prompts. So that's the good news in terms of, right, it's throughput. We don't don't think of it as a limit to the number of prompts. Think of it as a limit to how many prompts you do in an hour, right? It's the intensity of you putting these things in, and of course you can scale it up and down as needed and make sure it fits your organization. Now, the translation from prompts to throughput to capacity is a very hard one, and the reason for that is that it depends on the number of tokens also, right? So the more tokens you send to the model, the more capacity units it's going to take. So the challenge, I would say, is twofold. One, sometimes it's very hard to predict how many tokens you're going to get back, right? Because you're asking a prompt. So there's the tokens that go into the prompt itself, and the intermediaries, which is like, for example, the Defender incident that goes into it. But you never know how much comes back, right? So you need to account for all of those. And then it takes into context all the prompts that were before it, if it thinks that they are related, right? Because the GPT model is a stateless model. So every time you ask a prompt, it needs to remind it everything that happens before, because it's stateless. It doesn't hold this knowledge on the service side. So basically that goes into account as well, and all these previous tokens are being sent to the service also. So because of this, the hardship in saying how many tokens are actually going into it, it's very hard to make a translation between prompt and capacity units. So it does require kind of a shift in thinking, right? And to try to see how things are going and to try to understand what is impacting my capacity. For example, automation, right? If you have automation, you need to expect that when that automation is going to run, you will likely need a wider pipe for that, right? So that should impact your decisions, how you hook up your automations also. You may want to run automation as soon as an incident comes in, right? But you may not also. Maybe you want to, figure out how to manage it so it will spread the flow within your throughput, right? Or at times where you have more throughput. So there's considerations there. This is all going to take getting used to, but at the end of the day, this is a model that's very close to the actual resources that are used to give you the answer. It is partial compute. So from that sense, we hope it's going to be the most efficient solution and cost effective.
Thank you, Gad. That was an incredible amount of depth of information. Hopefully that's helpful to everyone in our community about how to think about provisioning security compute units for their Copilot journey ahead of them.
And Ryan, I know that we are getting close to the end, but I want to ask you a question because I know that in the beginning, in the early stage of Copilot development, we did some shifting and we understand some knowledge about how SOC analysts starting their investigation and the concept of ServiceNow, Snow. And I want maybe to ask you what was the shifting and what we build on top of the knowledge about like the starting of the investigation and how Snow is playing in our plugin ecosystem.
Yeah, it's actually builds off a lot of what Gad talked about earlier about how you have different contexts in which you operate in and how you begin a workflow. What we found, I think, right out of the gate with our private preview customers about a year ago is that 76% of them started their day inside of ServiceNow to begin their security incident response process. So the first plugin we built out was ServiceNow for IT operations or ITSM. And we've since added another additional capacity, I believe is now in preview at G8, which is for the security operations module. Both of those reflect different ways you would either begin your incident response process or perhaps go and get that additional context is what Gad talked about to then layer in and get this full and comprehensive perspective on what is occurring inside of your organization in responding to an incident.
Okay, thanks.
All right. So for that, I think we're right about at time. So thank you for joining the Tech Accelerator call today. I know we had a blast both putting together the content as well as answering your questions today. We'll have many more of these coming up. So for joining the next session, which will be about securing AI applications using Microsoft Defender for cloud apps, please take a look and check out aka.ms/accelerate/secure AI apps. Until next time, we'll catch you later, pilots, and thanks for joining.